Back then, the average house cost around $15,000. Can you imagine? It felt like a fortune, but somehow one paycheck kept the lights on, filled the fridge, and even left room for a family vacation. A brand new car rolled off the lot for under $3,000, and a gallon of gas hovered around 30 cents. You'd pull into the station and never even touch the pump. An attendant in a cap handled it all, washing your windshield, checking your oil, and handing you a map with a smile. Life wasn't lavish, but it stretched. Paychecks carried weight. Front porches carried conversations, and neighbors knew your name without ever needing a phone book. Ordinary moments stitched together felt extraordinary. And in the 1960s, those little things, now mostly forgotten, were the heartbeat of America. In the 1960s, the average home cost less than $15,000, and the average salary floated just over $7,000 a year. It wasn't much, but it was enough. One paycheck fed the kids, paid the bills, and even covered a week at the beach in the summer. You didn't feel rich, but you didn't feel left behind either. Every morning, the milkman left his mark before breakfast had even begun. The clink of glass bottles on the porch was a sound you could set your watch to. Whole milk, cream, maybe chocolate milk if you were lucky. It felt like Christmas hiding in plain sight. Sundays meant stiff collars and itchy dresses. You fidgeted on hard pews, counted ceiling tiles, and prayed Grandma had peppermints in her purse. The sermons felt endless, but that little candy made it bearable. And when church finally let out, brunch felt like a reward. At home, the furniture wasn't for comfort, it was for keeping. Plastic couch covers trapped the heat, chrome-legged, kitchen tables wobbled with every meal, and the clatter of silverware mixed with conversation. Tupperware parties filled kitchens with laughter, pastel bowls, and promises that leftovers would last forever, even if the lid always seemed to vanish. Dinner could be as simple as canned spaghetti poured steaming into a chipped bowl, or a shiny TV dinner in a foil tray. Overcooked peas, Salisbury steak, and a brownie that never baked right, but somehow it felt futuristic. And when Tang arrived, bright orange and sour, every kid begged for a glass. After all, the astronauts drank it, and that was enough to make it taste like space. The neighborhood was our playground, and the sidewalk was the stage. Kids crouched in circles playing marbles, tossed jacks across the pavement, or swung cracked bats at taped-up balls in empty lots. Stickball games stretched until the streetlights flickered on, and arguments over rules were settled with a coin toss. No batteries, no screens, just chalk-stained knees, scraped palms, and laughter echoing down the block. Walking to school wasn't an event. It was expected. A jacket, a backpack, and instructions to come straight home. Most of us didn't. We took the long way, stopped at the corner store for penny candy, and wandered in by dinner like nothing happened. At dawn, the paperboy's bike rattled through the streets, a canvas bag heavy on his shoulders. Newspapers thudded against porches before most alarms had gone off. By summer, bug spray and bunk beds defined camp, along with mystery meat in the cafeteria and a counselor strumming the same 2 guitar chords every night. And just when the heat felt unbearable, the faint jingle of the ice cream truck sent kids sprinting barefoot across scorching sidewalks, clutching coins and begging for bomb pops and fudgesicles. School days meant lunchboxes, metal first, plastered with superheroes or TV cowboys, and later plastic ones with that sharp, sweet smell of vinyl. Inside, a sandwich, a carton of milk that never opened neatly, and maybe a cookie if someone remembered. Under the desk, trades happened in whispers, chips for candy, cookies for an apple, our own little stock exchange, and before Pampers came along, diapers were cloth squares folded with precision, pinned tight with safety clasps. The bathroom pail wasn't for decoration. It was part of the routine, soaked and scrubbed, until laundry day filled the house with the smell of detergent, rubber pants, and a kind of stubborn love only parents could carry. The living room glowed with the soft light of a black and white TV. Rabbit ears stretched and bent like science experiments, wrapped in tin foil, adjusted with one hand while someone shouted, "Hold it right there." If the picture rolled, you smacked the side of the set. And when the tubes in the back glowed, faint orange humming softly, it felt alive, like the machine was breathing. Then came color TV, and it didn't arrive quietly. It was an event. When someone on the block got one, the whole neighborhood came over. Arms folded, eyes wide, nodding like they understood hue and contrast. Even cartoons looked dramatic, and for a moment, it was like watching the future flicker to life in your very own living room. Family memories weren't stored on phones, they were projected on walls. Slide projectors clicked and clunked, trays jammed, and half the pictures were upside down. Vacation beaches, blurry birthdays, or ants you didn't know you'd photographed. Each image narrated too loudly by someone in the room. And if you had an 8mm camera, you threaded reels by hand, dimmed the lights, and laughed as your life stuttered across a grainy screen. Polaroids were magic in their own right. A buzz, a wait, and then proof you existed, either pinned to the fridge or lost forever in a drawer. Music wasn't streamed, it was spun. Record players crackled with every party, every Saturday morning, every heartbreak. You learned which 45 skipped and how to fix it with a coin taped on top. And if you wanted sound in your pocket, the transistor radio was a miracle. Crackling AM stations, baseball games, Motown, the Beatles, all squeezed into something small enough to hold in your hand, even if the batteries never lasted long enough. Phones weren't smart, but they were solid. Rotary dials spun back with a satisfying click, each number its own little commitment. If your friend's number had too many nines, you'd be there all afternoon. Radio buttons in the car clicked like safes, one popping out when another went in, guiding you back to your favorite station with one push. Party lines meant you weren't always alone on the call. Neighbors listened in, laughed, and sometimes joined the conversation. And if you needed anything from a plumber to a babysitter, you didn't Google it. You opened the yellow pages, thick as a brick, heavy enough to prop up a kid at dinner. Television wasn't just background noise, it was the heartbeat of the living room. Families crowded around for I Love Lucy, still laughing at the chocolate factory and the grape stomp no matter how many times they'd seen them. Sunday nights belonged to Bonanza, while Gunsmoke and the Andy Griffith Show filled living rooms with cowboys, sheriffs, and small-town wisdom. And when Rowan and Martin's Laugh In hit the screen, it was like a confetti cannon, bright colors, fast jokes, and punchlines that made grown-ups howl while kids sat blinking, not quite getting it but laughing anyway. Then there were the moments that shook the world. The Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. A switch flipped. The hair, the screaming, the sound of the future arriving in black and white. Elvis, hips shaking on stage, driving parents crazy and teenagers wild. And through it all, Motown poured from radios, smooth and soulful, filling car rides, dance halls, and late-night bedrooms with a sound that still feels timeless. Kids found their magic in smaller places, comic books traded at recess, Viewmasters clicking through tiny reels of Disney castles or the Grand Canyon, and pinball machines lighting up diners and bowling alleys with bells and flashing bulbs. Sundays weren't just for church, they were for stretching out on the floor with the full-color comic section, Peanuts, Dick Tracy, and Little Orphan Annie spreading across 2 pages of pure joy. And then there were nights under the stars. Drive-in theaters glowing on the edge of town, families in station wagons, couples in convertibles. You hung the heavy metal speaker on the window, prayed it worked, and settled in. A cartoon played first, Bugs Bunny, Popeye, Tom and Jerry, before the big picture flickered onto the giant screen. Popcorn spilled, sodas sweated, and for a few hours, the world shrank to a glowing rectangle against the night sky. But not every broadcast brought joy. The day President Kennedy was shot, televisions flickered with stunned silence. Walter Cronkite, steady behind the desk, took off his glasses and gave the nation the news. His calm voice carried a weight that pierced every living room, reminding even children that something had cracked in the world. It was one of those rare moments when millions sat together in grief, bound by a screen and a voice that spoke only the truth. School in the 1960s carried its own rhythm, a mix of routine and ritual. Duck and cover drills were treated no differently than spelling tests. At the sound of the bell, you slipped under your desk, covered your neck, and pretended a thin wooden top could shield you from nuclear fire. Nobody questioned it. It was just another Tuesday. The classroom had its own perfume, warm, inky sheets from the mimeograph machine, handed out in stacks of purple letters. Kids lifted them to their noses without knowing why, just certain that smell was magic. Typing class was an orchestra of chaos, heavy keys clacking, ribbons smudging fingers, and the sharp ding of a carriage return. Fountain pens added their own mess, ink stains on shirts, smudges across notebooks. But signing your name in cursive felt like becoming someone grown. Curiosity was less guarded then. Chemistry sets came with glass beakers, real chemicals, and tiny burners that could scorch a table if you weren't careful. Foam volcanoes, stink bombs, and science experiments that would never pass today's safety rules all seemed perfectly normal. Out on the playground, baseball cards, marbles, and comic books changed hands in a secret economy. A backpack could be a trading floor, deals sealed with nothing more than a handshake and trust. Fashion wasn't about comfort. Saddle shoes scuffed before class, tube socks pulled high with bright stripes, and hair curlers wound tight before bed, leaving imprints on foreheads that lasted through morning announcements. At home, sewing machines whirred without electricity, foot pedals pumping as fabric slid beneath steady hands. Clothes were made, mended, and passed down, every stitch carrying a little history. And then there were the assemblies. Rows of children marched into the auditorium, flags in hand, voices raised in patriotic songs. Sometimes there was a guest speaker, sometimes a slideshow, but mostly it was a chance to whisper and fidget until the principal's eyes scanned the crowd. It was serious in theory, but to the kids, it was just another chapter in the rhythm of growing up in the 1960s. Filling up the car wasn't a chore, it was an experience. You pulled into the station, rolled down the window, and an attendant in a crisp cap handled the rest. He pumped the gas, checked the oil, wiped the windshield, and topped it all off with a smile. Sometimes he even handed you a free state map, the kind you could fold and refold 100 times before it tore at the creases. Errands had their own rewards. At the grocery store, you peeled green stamps off receipts and tucked them into booklets one by one. Weeks later, those little stamps turned into blenders, fans, or maybe a new toaster. Treasures bought not with money but with patience. Banks played the same game, luring families with free appliances just for opening a savings account. You might not earn much interest, but you walked out with a set of glasses or a shiny toaster, and somehow that felt like a fair trade. Shopping wasn't scrolling, it was strolling. Woolworth counters served up grilled cheese and milkshakes after a long afternoon of browsing. Woolco aisles stretched wide with bargain bins, and the Sears catalog sat thick as a brick on every coffee table. Dog-eared pages marked dreams, new furniture, a shiny bicycle, the Christmas toys you circled and hoped Santa noticed. Ordering from it was slow, but when that brown box finally arrived weeks later, it felt like a miracle on the doorstep. Every corner diner glowed with cigarette machines, metal levers clanking as packs dropped with a satisfying thud. Nobody asked your age, it was just how things were. And the Coke, it wasn't in plastic. It came sweating cold from heavy glass bottles pulled from chest coolers, opened with a mounted opener on the wall. When you were finished, those bottles weren't trash. They were money in disguise. You clinked them together in a cardboard box, hauled them back to the store, and walked out with nickels to spend on candy. One bottle could buy a jawbreaker that lasted all recess, proof that even pocket change carried weight. Some moments from the 1960s didn't just happen. They settled deep into memory. When President Kennedy's funeral aired, the country froze. Black and white screens showed the slow drum beat, the riderless horse, the grieving crowds. Even children too young to understand politics felt the weight. Living rooms fell silent, millions of people bound together by sorrow on a glowing screen. Just a year before, The Cuban Missile Crisis had wound the nation tight. Radios buzzed day and night, voices clipped with urgency, families listening for any hint of what might come next. It wasn't just news. It was a knot in the stomach, a glance at the sky that lingered longer than usual. Schools rehearsed duck-and-cover drills, and even kids knew the world was holding its breath. But then came July 1969. Grainy television screens flickered with ghostly images as Neil Armstrong's voice cracked through static. One small step for man. Families huddled close, eyes fixed on fuzzy black and white, and for one rare moment the entire country felt like it was sitting in the same living room. Pride, disbelief, wonder, it was all there, wrapped in silence and awe. The decade wasn't only about triumph or fear. Streets filled with protests and marches, signs raised high, voices demanding equality, young people clashing with tradition, civil rights, women's rights, generational divides. It was a nation in motion, restless and loud, rewriting the rules in real time. And through it all, there was a feeling, imperfect but undeniable, that America was moving forward. Space rockets thundered into the sky, highways stretched farther than ever before, suburbs bloomed across the map. Hope rode shotgun with uncertainty, and the future felt big, open, and waiting to be claimed. Looking back, the 1960s weren't just a decade. They were a collection of little things that stitched life together. A milk bottle on the porch, a Coke sweating in a glass bottle, the scratch of a fountain pen across lined paper, the buzz of a Polaroid waiting to reveal its secret. It was a time when neighbors knew your name, when one paycheck stretched just far enough, and when kids learned as much on the sidewalk as they did in the classroom. It was music spinning on vinyl, news carried by a steady voice on the TV, and a jingle from an ice cream truck that could send a whole block running. The 1960s were messy, uncertain and divided at times, but they were also bold, hopeful and alive. Ordinary days carried extraordinary weight, and even the smallest details left marks that never really faded. 100 forgotten things, mostly small, mostly simple. But together, they built a decade when America felt like it was going somewhere. And for a moment, it seemed like the whole country was holding its breath, waiting for what came next.